This week on RSBANDB Update, we go behind the crown with Mod Doom to look at community management through a different lens. From trust, transparency, and a two-way street, we look at what community management is all about. Also, his journey to Jagex and his return to RuneScape. This is RSBANDB Update, episode 945. Mod Doom, Behind the Crown. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another episode of RSBANDB Update. Tanis, you're here each and every week. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Shane.
Also, joining us this week for another installment of Behind the Crown. Joining us this week is Mod Doom.
Hello. It is a pleasure to be here.
I am glad to have you. And, we look at community management, and we really haven't talked on the CM side since, I think, a number of years ago, probably 2018. So it's going to be interesting to dive in and get your perspective on all things CM, what you're up to on RS, and just learn a little bit about you. But, of course, for folks joining us for the first time, you can follow our full show notes at update.show. You can find me, myself, in-game at Shane12088. Tanis can be found at Tanis79, and, well, I'm sure folks know where to find Mod Doom around the RuneScape community discords, his wonderful Twitter social media memes. Those have really been quite something. I'm always watching for those whenever you post those.
I'm glad you think so. Glad they're hitting the demographic.
Yeah, they are. They are. But, of course, you can also join us in our Discord at rsbnb.com/Discord. And before we begin, I need to give a big, huge thank you to these wonderful Patreon supporters for which RSBNB Update would not be possible without them. So I'd like to thank Andrew C., Drama Free, Jason S., Jesse W., Kesky, Maniac RS, Ricky A., Rippeth, Seth W., and The Naked Captain. So Behind the Crown is where we talk to a JMod in question, and with that, learn a little bit about the person behind the crown and what they do at Jagex. And for those who might be unaware, Mod Doom joined the community management team earlier this year. You're primarily, of course, known for your push to bring open and more direct communication to the RS community. And this time we'll be getting to know you a little bit better, learning about how you play RS, and, of course, getting a peek behind the crown at what is involved with community management. And to that, we like to start with our quick fire round. So with that, what's one fact about you, Mod Doom, the person that everybody should be aware of if they're not?
Now, this is a tricky one. I think I don't publicize this enough on social spaces, but I love cats. Absolutely love cats. Massive cat fan. So I am going to require cat pictures, especially on Twitter. If you have a cat, please show me them. I want to see their little toe
beans.
Yeah,
that's something I don't think we heard on your live streams.
No, I've managed to keep it pretty self-contained. I do have one cat. I have a lovely cat named Ripley. She is my moon and stars. She is my whole world. And she's wonderful. So if you have a cat out there and you're hearing this, send me a picture. Prove it. I want to see.
Does she have any cat pics?
I don't have any pics, but it would probably... It should be easy enough to do. Mine never moves.
Okay, fair enough. Favorite hobby?
I dabble in gardening. I love a house plant. I do... Occasionally, I've kind of fallen out of it since joining the team. But I used to like painting miniatures. I've got a soft spot for painting miniatures. I think it's very therapeutic, and you get something cool to just put on your desk at the end of it, which is very cool. Nice.
So, like miniatures from favorite franchises, or
yeah, I've got a real weakness for I sort of grew as a kid. I had some Warhammer 40,000 stuff, but I've then sort of switched to the fantasy stuff. I love my vampires. I love my skeletons. So all that sort of stuff is perfect. And I guess during lockdown, I started to sort of dabble in streaming. as sort of a hobby, just as a little bit of a creative outlet. Never really intended to do anything with it per se. I was just sort of like, it's just a cool way to stay connected with friends.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to be playing games and sat at this desk anyway. I may as well see if, I can make something.
See if anybody wants to watch you.
Yeah. And that has always been a really, really good creative outlet for me to sort of push myself, making lots of stuff in OBS and really just mixing it up in that regard. So that's always an interesting hobby. I'm always chipping away at that as a side project, as a creative outlet, which has been amazing. And the little community that I forged through that has been wonderful.
Nice.
So yeah, those are the sort of things I occupy my free time with.
You have a favorite TV show, movie, or book that you're running right now?
I honestly, I'm not a huge TV person. I've been watching. I've been watching Bob's Burgers. I was late to that, so I've been watching that, which is pretty good. I'm enjoying that. In terms of my favorite movie, Alien has got to be up there.
That's a classic.
It's where Ripley the cat got her name from.
Okay.
And I've recently reread the first two Dune books, Dune and Dune Messiah, which are both great. Absolutely love those. So yeah, those are top of mind for me.
Right on. And of course, we are a podcast centered around a video game. I have to ask this as a quick fire. What's your favorite video game that isn't RuneScape?
Oh, tough one. The Doom series has to be up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of them.
The name.
Yeah. But then, the Silent Hill 2, Bloodborne, Resident Evil, Metroid Prime, Alien Isolation. I love a game that oozes atmosphere. Absolutely magnificent games that have all sort of shaped me into the person I am today. In terms of hours played, Hunt Showdown has to be up there as well.
Okay.
I've easily got 1,000 hours in that. So bit of a mixed bag. But Doom and RuneScape are the two that probably sit top of the pile.
Yeah, and they're both classics for two very different reasons too. So good choice on that. Before we get into the meat of the matter, and sometimes this question is really revealing, favorite quote, if you have one?
That's a tricky one. I always like the customer is always right in matters according to taste. Which is to say that if someone says they like or dislike something, they're right. You are not a person who is meant to argue whether or not they like something. If someone says I like this, that's fine. It's an objective fact that they like it. There's no point trying to argue someone out of what they like or dislike, which is something I have to remind myself of quite a lot. In community management, sometimes people just say they just don't like something, and there's nothing you can do to talk them out of it. That's just the way it is. So yeah, that's always a quote that sort of springs to mind when I see some questionable takes.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I remember seeing a discussion somewhere about that recently. I don't know what community it was in, but it was a question of like what you said. Is it about taste, or does it give somebody the license to say, no, I'm right and everybody else is wrong for having this view, specifically those in the corporation, whatnot. I'm trying to remember where I saw that discussion, but I think your interpretation of it is an important way that people can look at that quote and use it to their advantage to just, in effect, carve out a space that's for them, right? Because if you're doing something that isn't necessarily speaking to you, are you having fun? Is it a good use of your time, specifically when it comes to things like games, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's not appealing to you, your time is valuable, and so you should be well within your rights to have full autonomy over whether or not you want to engage with a game or a part of a game or whatever it may be. You can just say, if I don't like it, I'm just not going to do it. So, yeah.
And that's actually a good pivot point for where we go into your RuneScape history, because like us and many of our listeners, you first encountered RuneScape years and years ago. The gig at Jagex brought you back to it, of course. So let's go back, way back. And how did you first learn about RuneScape, and what did it feel like to you way back when?
Oh, well, so I'd seen sort of like website banner ads or sidebar ads or some sort of advert for the game, and it really caught my eye compared to like there's gonna be a bit of a pull, but like Adventure Quest, I think it was the 2D.
Oh,
it was like a 2D similar kind of RPG, online RPG sort of thing.
And based on this, I bet we're at around 2005-ish probably for this, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 2005, I reckon, was by my best bets was when it was. So, I was like, okay, Adventure Quest like 2D, and then the 3D world and the sort of open-ended nature of it, where you could do, you could be a woodcutter or a blacksmith or a combat expert or what have you, and these sort of different diverse routes and avenues for you to take kind of appealed to me. So I got in. I burned a few shrimp on Tutorial Island, and boom, I was out into the real world, and it was a world filled with real people in all sorts of armor and outfits, and all of their gear told a different story, and you could be swindled out of your hard-earned GP or your armor. So I would be
did that happen to you?
Well, I'm fairly certain it did, but I've repressed it to the deep recesses of my mind. But that it felt so real. I mean, I'm not gonna bring the vibe down, but like as a young, what would I have been, like 9? It was quite an exciting opportunity. Like as an only child, I was like, oh my God, there are real people in this game that I can talk to, and we can go on adventures together. And it was so alive, and it just kind of got its claws stuck into me immediately. And I was like, yes. So
it was a special experience in terms of just being something that was unique and diverse compared to the other things that you were seeing out there.
For sure. And, I remember trying to, I think pretty much everyone who's around the sort of similar age to me will be familiar with that, trying to convince your parent or guardian to be like, hey, I want to get membership. And they're like, I have to do what? You want me to put my bank details into like a completely foreign, like a completely alien website that I've never seen before? And you're just online.
But it's only $5 a month.
And you're like, but look, yeah. So that was a moment, and not getting that membership. Wow, now looking back at it, what a flashpoint, what a pivotal moment in my life that could have been. But yeah, so I kind of fell out of it from there, and then last year, around September last year, I saw a position open up at Jagex, and I was like, hey,
I remember
RuneScape Jagex, yeah. And so I had a very strict rule that I wouldn't apply for a position or a game that I didn't play and enjoy of my own volition.
Oh, interesting.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to get back into it before I apply. I'm going to give myself a week. I saw that the application window was open for a week or 2 weeks, and I was like, okay, I'm going to play it first, and I will see how I feel. And sure enough, I was like, okay, this is still hitting. This is still ticking the boxes for me. Okay, RuneScape. And I applied, and I was unsuccessful, but the claws had already dug themselves in. I was back where I was as a 10-year-old back then in 2005, and I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of awesome. So I kind of never stopped playing after that, and then when the opportunity arose in January to join the team as a community manager, I threw myself at the application. I was like, yes. And I already had a little bit of familiarity with the game, and here we are. And so here I am every day, hooked. So,
I'm wondering with that. I'm wondering with that if other games have that same sort of pull, because everybody who has, I think, picked up RS that we here, Tanis, has said something to that effect, that it just hooked them in. I don't know if that's a thing with other games, or if it's just something that RS does is so uniquely for some reason or another.
Well, there's not a lot of games that have the legacy that RuneScape has.
Yeah, that's true.
History, and even though we have seen so much change, it's very familiar and brings back a nostalgia in a way that other games necessarily wouldn't. Like, take Mod Doom's, one of his favorite series, for example. If you look at the old Doom series, they're awesome. Like, and you can pull those up and you get the same feeling. But if you look at the new Dooms, they're really fun. Like, I really, really enjoy them, but they're very different, right? Like, it's a very modern kind of feel, and you can tell that difference. Whereas RuneScape kind of blurs the lines a little bit, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I'm thinking of that flashpoint of not getting membership. There was a point when I think I was like 15, so this was years later, or maybe it was sort of between then. I was a sort of preteen. I remember World of Warcraft had you could get a 7-day free trial or something like that, etc. And I booted it up on my family's sort of home office computer. I don't even think it had a graphics card. I think it had like no specs whatsoever. So I installed it and I went to boot up and log in. I'd created a free account and I was like, okay, I'm going to go in and try it. And it just wouldn't load. I don't think the family PC that was just sort of there as a Microsoft Office machine. It wasn't designed to run games or anything like that. Trying to boot WoW would just black screen the PC. It just would not open, and I would have to like task manager close the executable, and that was it. And I never got in to WoW, and I think that it would be, I often wonder how different it would have been if I'd got into it, because I think this is something that I really love about the RuneScape community, is that looking at other MMOs, the insurmountable wall of information that is presented to you is pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
But the RuneScape community is so generous with its knowledge, so quick to share knowledge that to them comes very naturally, but to a beginner is imperceivable. It is absolutely unattainable. So, the community have been very, very, very wonderful. So willing to share knowledge and point stuff out on the wiki and share secret truths about how best to experience every part of the game. And I don't think my experience with RuneScape would be anywhere near as nuanced and as in-depth as it is without that willing sharing of knowledge. And I think that's something that really, from my outsider perspective, really sets RuneScape apart from other MMO communities.
Interesting.
I really think that the RuneScape community is so forthcoming with its knowledge and so willing to share and willing to kind of Sherpa or coach newer players.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful. I'm immensely proud of seeing new players. Personal friends of mine have been like, I'm getting started. I got into RuneScape because they're giving it a try, which is wonderful. And they're giving into the peer pressure of me constantly harassing them to do it. But they're going in and they're saying, I was just in Burthorpe and I was standing there saying like, hey, how do I turn this ore into bars? And they're like, oh, you just do this. And then that person that then answered the question then proceeds to spend upwards of an hour just shepherding this new player, a friend of mine, just shepherding them through the basics and making sure that their questions are answered, not forcing their hands or directing them too aggressively, not backseating them too much, but just making sure that if they're ever like, okay, what do I do with this? Then they're like, here, I can help you with that. And I can't imagine many games where the community does that.
Yeah, because
maybe that's a cynic in me, but that's an amazing sign.
Because you mentioned people directing too much, and I know that if you lean on somebody too hard in one way or another, you can have the side effect of putting them off in the game. So that's a wonderful thing to hear, because that was the experience that I saw in Fresh Start last year. That's the experience I've heard of in RS3. I've even heard of it in Old School before. It's definitely something that the RuneScape community loves to do. And I think maybe that's an untold story that we need to showcase a little bit more about that, the new player perspective on that from our media side on the podcast. But you were there at one point, and I remember you when you first appeared on stream. I think you were total level 800 or something around there.
Yeah, I was 600. I was level 600. I was level 600 and something when I had my first introduction. We got our first look at Murder on the Border. Yes, Murder on the Border.
Right.
I was first introduced. So that was, oh my goodness, that feels like a lifetime ago now.
I know. But how is that adventure going?
So I today I hit level 1,801, and I'm
you're
closing in on combat level 100. I've taken a break from killing some King Black Dragons. I've been doing some Slayer tasks for the Raptor. But I really want to get back into my quests. I think I'm on like 89 quest points, something like that. I have not done many quests. I've done some classics. I've already got some firm favorites. Broken Home is an instant classic.
Oh my, that's a controversial statement from what I've heard
that before.
No, it isn't. Broken Home is peak questing. I love it. I'm slightly biased, I will admit. Behind me, where my desk is, there's a map of the Spencer Mansion from Resident Evil 1.
Okay.
So the moment I walked through the front door of Broken Home and I saw the foyer of the mansion and the giant staircase in the middle, I was like, I know exactly what this building is. Hang on. And it clicked. And so I loved it. But I've done the entire Forinthry quest line as well. That's been, obviously I've been following that. But then I've just been sort of dabbling in quests here and there. I'm trying to do them in timeline order.
That's a good way to go.
I was just picking them at random, sort of scattergun. And then a couple of weeks in, I was sat down having a coffee or a drink with Mod Jack, and I sort of mentioned something or other, and he was like, I said something like, oh, and I've done this quest and this quest and this quest, and he was like, you're doing them in timeline order, right? And I was like, no, and he was like, oh no, what? So I've gone back and I've done them now. So Stolen Hearts and Diamond in the Rough. The Violet is Blue. Incredible.
Oh, that's
what a masterful quest. I adore
Everybody
it.
always says we need more Violet.
We do. And then I sort of, things like Merlin's Crystal and Dragon Slayer, which are
the
vintage classics. But to someone who had never done them before, I was like, oh, this is a quintessential RuneScape-y questing. So I had a fantastic time with them. But that's kind of what I'm working on now. I'm sort of trying my hand at some bossing, so I'm doing some King Black Dragon and Giant Mole hard mode.
That's a good starting point.
And then I think next is Arch Glacier, and then who knows from there.
Have you been to God Wars 1?
No. I've not gone to the Dragonkin laboratory either. I've not done ED2. I keep hearing the siren song of doing ED3 trash runs. I'm like, it's tempting.
I mean, if you really want to level that combat up fast, that's something you can do there for that.
I think I'm like 75 defense, 75 attack, 70 strength, 70 constitution. Or something
we had a fun time with ED3 trash runs in Fresh Start Worlds to the point where we all got 99 magic within a couple hours there. So, extrapolate that out for live, and you can see what that's going to do. I want to touch on quests again, because we love our quests here. We're going to be doing Quest Week here with Dead and Buried. But have you touched the Elemental Workshop quest series?
No, I don't think I have. No.
Do you like puzzles?
Well, not to, I don't know how much of this I should say, not to spoil Dead and Buried, but there is a puzzle element in Dead and Buried, and I'm not proud of how long it took me.
Okay.
It was rough, but not unpleasant. It was embarrassing, and I was sat there with scratching my chin, like, they definitely want me to do this. It's meant to be completable. And yet here I am, stumped by this. So it took me a little bit of time, but I got through it. So I don't mind the occasional puzzle.
Okay.
I think
Elemental
nice
Workshop is the quintessential puzzle quest. I know that I get raked over the coals for saying I really like those series, but there's that. Have you ventured westward? Have you done any of the plague things, or started to look at the underground pass?
No, actually, next on my list of quest lines is Plague City is the next quest for me to do, which I think is the first of the Prif quest line.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's on the radar. I've gone north. I've gone to the Fremennik region. Done a bit of stuff there, and the lodestones. I don't know if this is a hot take. I don't know how I feel about lodestones. On the one hand, it's incredibly convenient for me to just be able to be wherever I need to be in a few seconds. But occasionally, just on impulse, I'll just be like, I'm just going to walk. And there is something really nice about just navigating the world on foot, especially being able to do agility shortcuts.
Yeah, we've heard all takes here on that. I know we have some folks on our team who refuse to touch lodestones, so you're in good company with that.
I feel like I'm biased in that I like being able to walk everywhere and I like everything being accessible within reason. But at the same time, whenever I click a lodestone, the animation is just a second or two. I'm like, come on, here let's go. Come on, I want to be there by now. So like I've been doing some bossing, and so being able to just immediately press a button and just within a blink of an eye be at War's Retreat, I'm like, why can't I have this for everything? Yeah. And the solution is that there are teleport spells that can get you places faster, but I'm stingy and I don't like to spend my runes as a two-hand melee user. I'm like, I'm not bringing runes to get places faster. I'll just slum it with the regular lodestone animations. So that's just my impatience, I think.
Well, don't forget, you can always speed that up with the wax and do fast lodestone travel.
Very true. I've only just recently been introduced to I've been advised it's pronounced Weezwax.
Yeah, that's what Mod Stu has put on the record for saying that, despite everybody saying Viz for all these years.
Mod Stu did extol the virtues of pronouncing it Weezwax. So there you go, Stu. I've upheld my part of the bargain.
Yeah, that's going to go down in pronunciations like whether it's Ardoyan or Ardogny or whatever people say, but we know it's Ardoyan now, and I feel like that one just rolls off the tongue nicely.
Yeah.
So a bit of questing, bit of skilling on that front. That's always good to just sit down and do a quest. And I guess that leads to the next question on here. How would you ultimately describe yourself if you had to put yourself into one of the core wheelhouses? Skiller, quester, PVMer?
I mean, I love it all. I've got my Master Jack of Trades aura, I think. It's a couple of levels up on the Jack of Trades aura, because I like to tick off a little bit of everything every day.
Yeah.
I don't really want to fall into a specific niche just yet. I've tried a few clues.
Fair.
I've done a few bosses, only easy clues for now, but I will get there. I've done a few bosses, but I've mostly done skilling. But I'm enjoying all of them in their own sort of way, and I like the variety that each of those provides, that you can, if I'm mining, for example, and I was mining in the Dwarven mine, in the sort of in the area where you can get orichalcum. I went into the dungeoneering area in there, and I was mining in there, and I got a clue scroll drop, and I was like, you know what, why not? And so I did the easy scroll, and obviously got nothing because my luck is terrible.
Okay.
But just having the freedom to jump between stuff is tempting. But yeah, I'm building up combat experience and confidence at the moment, and so who knows? In a couple of weeks, couple of months, I think this will all be sidelined with necromancy.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're all about to put our current things on pause for necromancy. When
I would hope so, but who knows? In a couple of months, I'll be wiping hard mode Zuck in record time. I'm just building up my confidence.
That's a good goal. That's a good goal. That's a good goal to have.
There's a couple of JMods who keep sharing their personal achievements. We have a channel that we all share up, sort of personal. If someone gets a soul die or someone gets a lucky drop from a clue scroll or whatever, they like to post them in there and sort of share which is great. And that's wonderful. And it's a nice reminder that they all do, in fact, play the game. But then occasionally someone will post something like, oh, I beat my record at hard mode Zuck, or someone will be like, oh, I posted this. And meanwhile, I'm like, hey, I managed to shave a minute off my KBD time by not camping a level 30 shield.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. I mean,
they're like, good job, Doom. Well done.
We all start somewhere, right? And,
right. And that's the kind of positive encouragement I need to.
And you mentioned the Arch Glacier. That's a perfect PVM teaching tool, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that many times. I think that both internally and externally, I've heard that it's a great place to build up that confidence. So that will be my next objective for sure.
All right. Now there's a tough one coming up. You can't pick necromancy for this. What's your favorite skill?
Oh, that's cruel. Mining and smithing are intrinsically linked, and I love those. I love the process. But my first 99 was agility. I'm a sucker for the aesthetic of Het's Oasis.
Okay.
And sort of that.
So it wasn't Silverhawks then.
So Silverhawks were the gateway.
Okay.
Right? So I got my Silverhawks and I was like, oh, I just get XP for running around. This is a no-brainer. Yeah. So I slapped those on and I started to get through the levels. I was sort of getting to like level 35, level 40 something. And I was like, okay, well, someone somewhere, I mentioned Silverhawks in passing, I think in the Discord, and someone mentioned like, oh, but you can't get the skilling pet that way. And immediately it was like the Toy Story, I don't want to play with you anymore. Like I was like, get these things off me at once. So I immediately dropped them. And I was just sort of flitting between the agility courses, the Tree Gnome Stronghold, Het's Oasis, and then eventually Anachronia. And it was just a really relaxing way of just, it's not AFK, but it's just enough APM to, scratch the itch in my brain of being like, you need stimuli, you have to do something. So
I don't know if I've ever heard this perspective on agility before.
And then you get the side benefit of being able to then use all the agility shortcuts. So yeah. It was very beneficial and just a really chill time. And I get it. I totally get it. Players have said to me,
yeah,
there's not enough to it. There's not enough for doing it. There's not enough reason to train it. There's not enough rewards for training it. There's no way to, how do you monetize that skill? It's not like fletching or something where you can be like, oh, I'm just going to make arrows and sell them. You can just stand at the GE and say, hey, I'm in good shape. Please give me money. Like, you can't monetize it. There's no, I get
well,
that.
You can kind of with the Anachronia agility course if you get enough tickets and then you make the double surge and double escape codices.
Very true.
But
yeah, I haven't.
That takes forever.
It does, and I think I would love to see more. I don't have the creative vision to make agility into more than it is right now. I would love to sit down with far more gifted and far more prescient JMods and just sort of be like, how do we make agility more than it is right now? But that is an enormous undertaking. And
skill reworks are. Because like you mentioned mining and smithing, and it was nothing like this pre-2019. I don't know if you've looked into what it used to be like.
No, I absolutely haven't, but I am very curious to see now, because a few people have mentioned that it was.
I think the best way for you to experience that would be to make an account on Old School and try and do that same mining and smithing flow that you liked at the very beginning. And just see how day and night it is.
Yeah, I must admit, I have not touched Old School through no, it's not an indictment, but I just haven't. No, I haven't been able to find the time, and
that's 100% fair.
RuneScape has its claws in me 100%. Yeah. So I think I made a joke with a friend who has always been a staunch fan of Old School from the day it was released. When he found out I was joining Jagex, he was over the moon. But he's always been like, so when are you going to start old school? When are you going to start old school? And I think I jokingly said when I get 99 in everything. But I've genuinely started to think that's quite a good point to step away.
Yeah.
and at least try and see what old school is like. I know that.
I mean, I didn't dip my foot into it until January this year, and I've been around since 2004. So, I mean, no pressure on you for.
Okay, I can wait then. Okay, that's good. That's good to hear. Amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, mining and smithing prior to 2019 was an absolute night and day difference. It's something that I know Mod Jack always talks about in terms of whether or not he would go down the path of doing such a project again, because it was effectively 2 new skills and the like. So yeah, definitely a night and day difference. So before we move on and talk about what it's like for Mod Doom to return to RuneScape, I just want to take a moment and thank our Patreon supporters for this week, because without them, we would not be where we are. So this week, I'd like to thank Alfie S., Amos Reed, Andrew C., Arvids L., Big Huge Rat, Chunk the Monk, Cycle RS, Drama Free, Duramax, Free Milk, Jacob G., Jade Gizmo, Jason S., Jeebus, Jesse W., Kesky, Ling01, Maniac RS, Mohan V., Nate the Great, Nick G., Parnassius, Renhawk, Ricky A., Rippeth, RS Nerdherd, Samuel FL, Scott DS, Seth W., Shirt Pants, Tabby, The Naked Captain, The Dabbing Goat, Tim, Tom V., Ukulele Steve, and Zant. Of course, what we're talking about is our Patreon offerings at patreon.com/RSBANDB. Starting for as little as $1 a month, you'll receive a special mention in our show notes, access to an entire back catalog of more than 60 monthly bits, monthly bonus shows. You'll also get the ability to vote on monthly bit topics. We're voting on one right now, actually, and it'll be coming out next week. Some interesting topics between a Slayer hot or not list and where the signature heroes are at in 2023. Also, we have our VIP tier for $3 a month, where you receive a special VIP rank on Discord, including chat channel access, a mention on the podcast at the start of the month, and high-quality stereo versions of the show. And if you want to give the ultimate gift, we have our Insider tier for $5 a month, where you receive a shout-out on the podcast each and every week and gain exclusive access to the outtakes we use to make the clip show at the end of the year. And this also, of course, includes the world-famous RSBNB Update Christmas card. We couldn't be doing what we're doing without our supporters, so big, huge thank you to everybody. Thanks so much, everyone. So what was it like coming back to the game for you?
Yeah, I think the new player experience is something we always talk about. It's something that I've spoken about with a lot of with the creators that came and got hands-on with necromancy. It's something that we spoke about, especially with Joshua Strife Hayes. He came in and he was hyper fixated on the new player experience, and it's something that I can totally empathize with. Yeah, I mean, you come out of Tutorial Island, right, and you get flashbanged by toolbars and information. It's like someone letting off one of those confetti tubes that just explodes. It's right in your face, and you're like, "What is happening?" Oh my god! So, but that's MMOs. I understand that, and so I was a little bit overwhelmed at first, but it just meant that I sidelined a few skills. I was like, okay, summoning, what are you? You can wait. Hang on. We'll get to you. And so a couple of skills kind of fell by the wayside.
Oh, that's interesting. So you pretty much compartmentalized it into things that interested you versus not, right?
Yeah, hanging out in Berthorpe and Taverley was really, I think it's fantastic as a starting point to just be like, okay, a lot of what I need is already here. I can just get started. I can get my foot on the ladder and really work my way up from here. And everyone there is always willing to share knowledge. Again, the community are incredible and have been coaching me so much every step of the way, and are very civilized about it. They're very, they're very willing to ask. They're sort of saying, I don't want a backseat. Is it okay if I give tips and things like that? And of course, I'm totally receptive to that. I cannot imagine how agonizing it is to see someone floundering with something that you've done for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
You're like, please let me help you. And so I am always willing to take advice. even if I don't immediately act on it, it's incredible to have that knowledge shared.
Well, I think you had some good set of advice if you're 1800 when you were 600 back in February.
Yes, I mean, I have to thank Mods Spear and Mod Sponge and plenty of other JMods who have imparted so much knowledge to me. Just, I'll just be in the break room getting a coffee or something, and they'll say, how's it going with the skilling and stuff? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. And they're like, oh, actually it's way better if you do that XYZ. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I go off and I do it, and sure enough, it's infinitely better. I was doing, for example, I was recently doing a bunch of smithing. I had a ton of Baneite ore, making Bane stuff. And I was like, this is taking a while, but I'm getting through it. And someone was like, oh, if you've got loads of GP, you can just buy a bunch of potions of masterwork. And it massively speeds up the process. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll throw some GP at those. And I picked those up, and wow, night and day, revelatory difference in how quickly I was getting stuff done.
You probably might have bought some of Tanis's products, because he was at one point selling smithing products like that.
You've done me a great service, Tanis. It was a wonderful breakthrough, and I'm feeling really good about it. And I've got like 400 left for DXP, so I'm excited. It's gonna be a good time.
That's awesome. I have so in regards to the new player experience, Shane and myself, it was real eye-opening when we went back through that with Fresh Start Worlds, and realized just how good the stuff was. Sometimes you don't notice how good an update is when it doesn't really touch you, way past the level band for that to be relevant.
That's Oasis.
And so I'm just curious, how does the skill progression feel to you, Mod Doom? And do you enjoy that part of the game where you're kind of you have to run over here to mining and smithing, for example, you're grabbing your ore and then you're smithing it, and there's all kinds of ways to kind of speed that up once you get it down, but how does that kind of progression feel to you?
I personally like it. I mean, you've given the example of mining and smithing. I quite like that natural flow. But another example that sort of stuck with me when I first started was when I finally got round to summoning. And you get your sort of daily provision of here's one of everything. And I was like, okay, cool. And then you head over to White Wolf Mountain, and suddenly you're killing wolves, and they're dropping gold charms and they're dropping bones, and you're like, wolf bones, sorry. And you're like, oh, hey, I can just get more of these by going out into the world. But there's the obelisk is right there, just at the foot of the mountain over at Tavali. And so it kind of incentivized me to go out and pick up more charms, and I'm always pocketing charms whenever I'm out and about in the world and banking them, so that I kind of now know that if I ever need anything, I can quickly teleport to Tavali. There's a bank right there, and the obelisk is right there, and I can very quickly get summoning, which feels great. And it kind of, I wasn't instructed to do that, and it kind of naturally happened as part of the flow of gameplay.
I never actually thought of that with White Wolf Mountain and the wolf bones and the gold charms being right next to Taverley and the obelisk. I never have actually thought of that. That's actually a really good one.
It just sort of naturally occurs, and it's awesome. And you get your spirit shards from your geodes. So from the moment I started opening geodes, I was like, oh, I know these are important, I'll keep them. And not just for circumventing pre-max cash. I had no aspirations that early on of being like, I'm going to be balling out, I'm going to be selling stuff for above max cash. I was not at that point yet. I was like, okay, these are valuable just for the summoning, not just the monetary value. So I was like, okay, I'm going to keep these. I think there are always valid points about the new player experience, and I would love for us to be able to do more. And I think there's a challenge, there's a balance to be struck between how much do you front load a player with, because essentially if you're looking at omitting skills from the new player experience, you have to make the argument, are they less important?
Right.
If we say, okay, the new player experience is You get wood cutting, fire making, cooking, fishing, mining, smithing, combat. You don't get prayer. You don't get defense. You don't get magic. You don't get summoning. You don't get agility. Are those less than skills? Are those inferior skills? Are they less useful? Or how do you define what are core skills that a player should know from the moment they come in? Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of pures would be very upset if we're suddenly like,
I was just going there.
Prayer sucks. Fletcher, that's not the case. But if we turned around and said, hey, these skills aren't going to be in the tutorial because they're not as important, it's not a big deal to a lot of people, but to some people it is everything. So that is a very delicate subject. So I think providing players with an introduction to everything is important. But you got to do it in a way that's not overwhelming. Yeah, it is a very difficult balance. And I think that as far as they go, I think Berthorpe and then Taverley having so much so close together is a very intricate and well put together example. I think it's a real I don't want to say masterstroke. That sounds a bit too complimentary, but it's a really, really wonderfully put together introductory section that I think is a little bit overshadowed by players who get flashbanged by all the toolbars. I think that kind of puts people off. Yeah, that makes sense. If you just play around in Berthorpe for an hour or two, suddenly you're like, oh hey, it's all here. And you can have like level 15 in the majority of skills after doing that, and I know that's something that we found in Fresh Start as well. I still vividly remember burning shrimp on Tutorial Island for hours, being like, but when I get off the island, I'm going to be like cooking level 20 and I'm going to be absolutely unstoppable. And I was like, I'm kind of stuck on level 3. All right, well, I guess I'll leave. And I was like, I must be doing something wrong. Maybe I should just, obviously I was trying to metagame it. 10-year-old Doom being like, I've got the strategy here. But no, it was, that was always the point. It was supposed to be kept. And I was just not smart. So
you bring up a good point about things being in, the Berthorpe and that early game, that whole area. Did you ever do any of your early game stuff on mobile? So how did you find that experience if you did?
No, I didn't do any on mobile. I know that the new player experience on mobile is different. So I actually would like to go back and look at it now, especially knowing more. Yeah, and being in the role that you're in, that'd be an interesting. I think it's an interesting one to look at, because I think that the mobile experience is very interesting to me as someone who admittedly doesn't really use the mobile app. I've got it installed. And I've logged on a couple of times. I logged on during DXP, no AXP waste during DXP, and I've logged in a couple of times to do dailies. But I've never done PVM on mobile, and I've never done a lot of input intensive or high APM stuff on mobile.
That's the same boat that I'm in, to be honest, when it comes to mobile.
But I just like being able to just sort of do stuff on the go. So I always want to see mobile included in the conversation. I think a mobile player is just as valid a player as anyone,
of course.
But there are challenges and restrictions with how much space you can take up on the screen, how easy everything is on mobile. So
it's it is
a challenge.
Like it's an entirely different input scheme on that, and I know it's something that a lot of people struggle to adapt to, but for others it was completely natural. And I guess with that we can kind of move into your natural fit, and that's what it's like to be a community manager, because I feel like everybody knows that the content developers make content, they design it, they implement it, they propose ideas and such. So what exactly, for folks who might not be aware, what exactly is a community manager, and what does the job entail from a strictly theoretical point, I guess?
So It's an excellent question, and I get it a lot. The community manager role exists to essentially be the bridge between players and developers. You are simultaneously, you bring news, updates, and information that's relevant to the community. And then you absorb feedback and data and analytics and everything else. But primarily you absorb feedback from the players and circulate that back into the team. Especially here at Jagex, the team are incredibly receptive to the idea of having a player voice embedded into development at an early stage. I am very fortunate, and I harp on about this quite a lot, that I came in at a really, really wonderful time in Jagex. There's been sort of a sea change or a pivoting in direction to be more community driven. Sort of we're rallying towards that as a mantra, as an ethos, is to be community driven. And you know, often we'll be sitting down as a company and we'll be talking about what does it mean to be community driven. And so we sort of have these existential conversations. But what that means at its heart is that it's about being considerate and flexible and open to player voice. And that is a wonderful thing. And I hope that we can continue to push what that means and expand on that. But that also means that's a lot of pressure on the community managers of Jagex, because it just means that voice is so much more valued and is so much the importance of it being a voice that accurately represents the community is so much higher.
And I always feel like CM has been a team in Jagex that at times has wanted to do so much more, but at times weren't able to do that with that. And I feel like what you're describing, the general push to being more community oriented, is putting CM in the wheelhouse that they've always wanted to be in the past, but might not have been able to. And you mentioned it's pretty much a two-way street between bringing news to the community, but also bringing those community voices into the development process. And, you know, we see you out a lot in terms on social media, on Reddit, and the live streams, of course. And I'd imagine there's another side to it as well that probably entails lots of meetings.
Yes. I'm not sure if this will be corroborated by others. You know, I listened to Mod Sponge's Behind the Crown, and he didn't mention it, but I think that a lot of meetings. If there's something that Jagex loves, we love a meeting. And especially with necromancy coming up, we are having to be a little bit more protective of our time. But right. I cannot tell you how incredible it is coming from a previous project, working on a game in the past, where the community team and the developers were quite literally on the other side of the planet from one another.
Oh my.
We were hemispheres apart. We had no communication whatsoever. It was very restrictive.
So this must be a complete breath of fresh air then for that.
Unbelievable breath of fresh air. Going from that to being invited to, you know, high level discussions, early design conversations about, you know, we want to do X, Y, Z, and we want to do this in 2024. Here's what we're looking at. Here's this. How does the community feel about this? How does the community feel about this, et cetera, et cetera. And then being asked to be that player voice in those conversations is daunting, but it is incredibly rewarding at the same time. It is scary, but it is.
You're literally carrying the weight of the RuneScape community on your guys' shoulders.
Right?
Effectively what you're saying.
I try not to think about it, but yeah, it's a lot, and it is something that we are getting better at every day. So we are definitely working and learning all the time. And, you know, my position in this is very much trying to balance new player experience and the core community experience. So in core spaces,
and that's so good because you come from that new player side. So that's a wonderful perspective for you to have.
But then at the same time, you've got Huli, who's been here for years and has so much experience with this community and really understands a lot of the community and a lot of the history. And also Azana, who's been here for 2 years, I think. 2 and a bit years, maybe.
Yeah, something around there.
Who is very, very much embedded more with the creators and the creator side of the community. Still very active in the sort of public community spaces, of course, but also is the point of contact for creators as well. So
yeah, he's really good at that side of it. I know from my own perspective on that. So
yeah, we kind of each look after different disciplines and schools of thought in terms of different player groups. Which is wonderful because it's my understanding that it wasn't always the case, that the team was smaller. And so being able to now have things divided up and have us each be not experts, but I would hope to one day be able to
just say that you each have your own focus field, I guess, is a good way of putting it.
Yes, yeah, we are all responsible for different areas. So if a question comes up around creators, it does not come to me. Go straight to Azana. Azana will have the answers. And so having that sort of cluster of the community team is fantastic. Speaking to Mod Light and Mod Aiza and the team over on Old School, there's what, five, maybe six of the team over there. And then, speaking to Huli and Azana, and then Mod Noms, our social media expert. It does feel like we were a little bit more ragtag at the start,
right?
But
the perspective I'd say that you're then showing is that you guys have filled it out and whatnot, and it's really starting to mesh and run as a team.
The team is absolutely, and Huli has done so much to help us be coordinated and organized, and each know our role and each know what we need to do every step of the way. I mean, the process of the lead up to necromancy, I was expecting to be unadulterated crunch, but Jagex is a zero crunch company. I get told off.
Yeah, we talked about that. I think in the Mod Ramen Behind the Crown about that. And that was something.
Yeah, I get told off if I'm responding to messages outside of the 9 to 6. They're like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, it's different with a CM. It's different. But
and we thank you for being here at that time outside of that 9 to 6.
It's my pleasure. I was expecting necromancy being, the biggest thing to happen in RuneScape in decades, potentially. This being such a momentous thing, I was expecting this to be such a crunch. I was mortified. But Huli Huli and the team above all of us, the whole marketing team and everyone who's worked on necromancy, every single person whose name is in that first look blog has done so much to make this so organized and so coordinated that every single step of the way I've been like, oh, where are we on, the insights blog on rituals? And then Azana's like, oh yeah, it was done like 7 days ago. It's been localized. It's ready to go. We're just going to publish it when it's ready. And I'm like, oh, okay. We are so ahead of schedule. We are not like hand to mouth scrambling to get stuff done. The team is so organized. Everyone has been amazing. It has been a joy. And I'm sure that not everyone feels that way. I'm sure some people are anxious and hysterical and worried sick about every single thing. But to me, it's been smooth sailing. So I'm having a great time with it.
Right on.
But anyway, yeah. So
how did you get into the CM community management field and the games industry in general? I guess is where we go from here, because that's important history for everything that you're doing.
Absolutely. So I had completed I was in the process of completing my master's degree. I did some I did a history degree, and then I worked in an office for a little bit, worked in a call center, worked in some administrative offices. I saved up some money and did my master's. And while I was doing my master's, I went to the launch event for Resident Evil 2, hosted by Capcom in London. And it was a haunted house that looked like the Raccoon City Police Department, the RPD. You run through it and you get chased by zombies and stuff like that.
Nice.
And then at the top, it was like a rooftop bar where you got, quote unquote, vaccinated. You got to drink a cure, which was just a shot in a test tube. And then it was just sort of hospital beds that had been turned into benches and seating areas and stuff. And there were loads of RPD and Resident Evil themed cocktails and beers and whatever. So it was just a nice experience with my friend who's a diehard Resident Evil fan and I. And I sat down on a bench, and the person that sat down next to me was Kat, the community manager for Capcom. And she struck up a conversation. She was handing out some merch, and I pilfered a jacket, which I've still got the label on it and everything. It's still in my wardrobe. But we sat down, had a conversation, and I asked, I follow you on Twitter. What does a community manager generally do? What is the community manager day to day like? And Kat talked me through it. She was very candid, very open, explained a lot of it, and I just sort of had a light bulb moment in the conversation. I just sort of had the realization. I was like, yep, I can do that. That is what I want to do. And so I then spent the rest of my master's degree looking for opportunities to do anything in the industry. So I took a little job I got a contract position in EA. I worked with Electronic Arts for a bit in their social media team, which was rough. If I am being brutally honest, it was very, very difficult. And then I moved on to a social media manager position in higher education. I worked for a university doing their social media.
Oh, interesting.
And then I was applying for social media manager positions for games companies. And then I applied for one, and they said, oh, we've actually filled the position for a social media manager, but we were looking for a community manager. We saw that you streamed in your free time and you've got this experience and et cetera, et cetera. Would you like to interview to be a CM? And I was under the impression that I was underqualified. I thought, I don't have that much experience in the industry. I've only got experience as a social media manager. But I went for it and I got it. And then 18 months later, having been a CM for 18 months, I applied to join Jagex, and here we are.
Nice. That's exactly that. That's an interesting backstory because, a lot of people go into it with, I want to make games. I want to work in the games industry. But I guess that's probably a natural fit too, because you mentioned your early start of always being interested in Doom, and then how gaming was a thing that just stuck with you throughout history. So I'd imagine that when you were up at that rooftop party there, the wheels were just turning into your head, and that's what I can do. And I wonder at that time, did you imagine that you could ever see yourself in a position where you have such a huge role like you do now at Jagex?
I think it was always a pipe dream, to work on a game that a household name and a franchise and a game that you knew growing up and that you were familiar with. I can't think of a more amazing opportunity. So I am thoroughly still deliriously happy here, and I can't believe that I'm here at not at such a young age, but at such an early point in my career.
Fair enough.
I was always sort of under the assumption that I'd have to work my way up through like indie games and different projects, and have to kind of grin and bear it with a couple of projects before I could make it to the big time.
Yeah.
But I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than RuneScape.
And we might be biased here, but more special than it in terms of community and whatnot.
So true. So true.
And you talked about what CM looks like and, what you guys want to do for CM. So does that largely fit in terms of what you see community management as for the role, in terms of the ideal world, community management, that bridge of bringing players and developers together. Are you doing that right now at Jagex? And is that what you see CM as being in its purest form?
This is a tough one because I think it's hard to say, right? Because I think, you know, in an ideal world, what does a CM look like? It's hard to say me, right? Like I can't, that's an awfully deranged thing to say, but I think CMing is an incredibly nuanced and complicated job. Games and companies of all shapes and sizes have got this wrong in the past and continue to do so. I'm not going to name and shame, but I think the crucial element of CMing is there has to be a human element to the role. I'm a human being. Everyone who works on RuneScape is. Even Mod Shogun, contrary to popular belief, his wonderful work, right? He is a human being. But it's a horribly scary moment being brought out in front of, you know, hundreds of thousands of players and just, you know, them being told, hey, that's the bridge between you and Jagex.
I mean, you looked like you were ready for it.
You would think so. That demeanor hides a crippling level of anxiety.
So that was there when you first...
of course. Okay. There's a bundle of nerves under. Oh my goodness, the nerves when we did our first Q&A as well. It's always there, and I don't even. Let's not even talk about how anxious I was about the golden gnomes. That was an incredible experience. But oh boy, the 5 minutes before we went live, I was a mess. But it, you know. I was anxious at first, but I couldn't have joined at a better time. The whole company is rallying to this notion of being player-driven, community-focused. It's like a North Star that's guiding our decisions. So it makes my job a little bit easier. But
and the first thing I saw with you on that live stream, and I said to Tanis at the time, I said, he's looking to make these connections with the individual players. If he's able to do that, and he's able to do the communication side of it, working with the team, we're going to be heading in on the right foot here. That was my initial first impression of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was right there with Shane. I could tell the effort in the individual. There, you know, I think there has been some very beloved CMs in the past, and there were some pretty big shoes for you to step in. But I didn't see you really miss a beat with that. And, you know, I mean, the one that comes to mind, I'm sure you heard this from the players, you know, everyone just dearly loves Shawnee. And it was his ability to connect with people, I think, that made him stand out so much. And I see a lot of that. But I have a question. Now that you've explained kind of what CM means to you, Shane and I both play, you know, a few different games, but this is our main game. And the RuneScape community is very unique. It's unlike any other community that of any game that I've played. You know, do you feel the same way? And if so, like, what are some of those differences that stand out to you? And then how do you manage that? Because it's its own animal, kind of.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because, you know, I try not to let it get to me, but I would hope it's very normal. I hope it's not just me, for a CM to look at a game and a community and be like, this is my baby. This is my world now. This is, you know, everything revolves around this. Something to sort of circle back to your previous question for a moment, Shane. I think one thing that I feel like is a CM should be passionate and love the game that they're working on in all of its facets. And there is a balance there. You know, they should be visible and accessible, but they shouldn't be a punching bag. And they should also not be, they should also not facilitate. They shouldn't pass that on in a way. You know, it's very easy for me to say, players hate XYZ, by the way. I can circulate a report internally and say, oh, hey, they hate this, by the way. This update sucks and they hate this. And, you know, I can look at very impassioned comments on like Reddit and Discord and Twitter, and there is merit and truth in those opinions. but it's about striking that balance. You know, not everything's run by a CM, and not every CM has a say in everything that happens. And I think most importantly, CMs need to be able to see the balance in both communities they represent, players and developers, because it's, you know, it's all very well and good just being like, I'm the voice of the players.
And there you're coming back to that bridge perspective again.
There's a challenge there where that only goes one way. To then be like, oh, players hate XYZ. You know, this is bad. This needs fixing. They don't like this, etc., etc. This is not good enough. That's valid feedback. It's not valid feedback. I can get more into that later, but it is valid.
I think I know where you're going with that.
It's not wrong. It's just constructed in a certain way.
Exactly.
It's very easy to throw that towards the developers, but then you have to then go and sit down with them and have a coffee. And they're like, yeah, that made me feel really bad.
And then there's developers who are very analytical, who want to know, well, if they're saying it's bad, maybe there's some other perspective to it that the CM can help me shine light on.
And it's about striking those balances of saying, you know, I can say players don't like this, for example. I don't know. Let's use, this isn't a good example, but let's say the Grove, Woodcutter's Grove update. I can say players didn't like this. Players didn't like XYZ aspect of the update, or players didn't like the Grove in general. But then I also, as part of my job, I have to then go in and collect analytics and data about how many players played Woodcutter's Grove on day one, how many players did it in the first 30 days, things like that.
And in fact, prove your point, right?
Or more often than not, it doesn't correlate. That there'll be a very vocal group of players who are like, this isn't good enough. And then it turns out that 70%, I'm pulling these numbers out of thin air, 70% of people.
Of course. And just to be fair, I also want to say that a lot of people also didn't say that the Woodcutter's Grove was horrible. It's just an example of this case.
Of course. Yes, of course. No, the Woodcutter's Grove, wonderful, absolutely fantastic. Oh, I was glued in there for so long. But as an example, yes. So a vocal group of players will say this sucked. And then the numbers will say 80% of people who logged in were in the Woodcutter's Grove for at least 10 minutes that week. And it's like, okay, well, everyone's going there. So was it bad? Really? And so it's about striking that balance of listening to them. And then it's about listening to both sides and, you know,
and finding the data to say, does this mesh with what this person or this group in the community is saying, I guess then.
Absolutely. It's about trying to find that balance of here's what they say. Here's how much of that, here's what the data informs us of that opinion. Here's what we can glean from that, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about those balances, and it's been very interesting. It's been a real learning experience of finding out, you know, what players say and what players do are not always the same thing.
I can only imagine. And
very often that's a confusing combination.
You bring up such a good point with that, and I'll come to you, Tanis, in a minute on that. There's always that perspective that maybe the players are saying something, but then the question is, well, is the team looking into this from the data side? And I think the biggest thing you've just uncovered and confirmed, because I know a lot of people had doubts about this in the past, is that at least CM is looking into this, and then you're going to be providing that feedback to the devs on that. So that's actually reassuring from our perspective to hear here. Is that where you were going, Tanis?
Yeah, I was actually going to say it's very refreshing and reassuring because, you know, given where we're at, we hear that vocal minority and we talk about it, and we could never be sure how much impact that had. Is that vocal group punching up above their weight class? You know what I mean? And sometimes it feels that way. And so it's really good to hear you say that, no, we're looking at everything. We're looking at the numbers.
I think it's something I like to. I don't want to push back against people speaking up, because that is antithetical to what I want to do. But in the same vein, just because you're the loudest doesn't mean you're right. Sometimes raising feedback once and then letting us go away and let me cook will yield the same, if not better, results. And
yeah. And I think
I
think it's important for you to have that trust to be able to do that as well.
Yes, absolutely. And also to add to that, I'm obviously doing what I can to be quite active on Twitter, on Discord and Reddit as the core spaces. That does not mean I'm the only one who looks at these things. I will very often have conversations with JMods from every department about things they see on these spaces. So just because they don't engage with them doesn't mean they don't see them. And that is something that I want to keep working on. That is one of my sort of missions.
Yeah, that's so good to hear, because I know that's something that has been continuously talked about in terms of, are the JMods watching? What's CM doing to corroborate what we're telling to them? And you've just confirmed that all to everybody, and that's just so refreshing to hear from our perspective, because sometimes as players, that's something that's lost in the grand scheme of things. You know, big updates coming out, we're seeing all the pre-generated content for it, like with necromancy, and it really just brings it back to show that yes, there are methods and there are wheels that are turning in the gears behind the scenes, allowing this sort of stuff to happen. So, and I guess that leads to another interesting point. How has all this gone over the past few months since you really started to hit your stride? Are you feeling like this new strategy is a success of bringing the player's voice more centric? Are you feeling like that's more of a success? Or you feel like you're having good success in your role?
It feels great. Well, I mean, I feel like it's great. Initially I was really eager to get stuck in and be in the room in as many of these little micro communities is a bit of a misnomer. Some of these communities are massive, but like Cluers, Fashionscape, Achievement Hunters, all these different sort of smaller communities within the RuneScape community. I wanted to be making sure that I was in those spaces early.
Yeah.
So that I wasn't, and I've sort of spoken to communities and said, okay, what am I missing? Am I missing anything? The RuneScape art community, the Clue Chasers, the achievement help, Diescape, Screenscape, the Necromancy, PVM Encyclopedia, all of these different community spaces, all of these different areas that I can be in. I wanted to be everywhere just in case. So I can always jump in and ask questions, and those communities are wonderful. They're very receptive. So I've that's been sort of that was my initial pitch, was I wanted to be more present in that way. I wanted to bring my sense of humor and sort of spotlight the fun I've been having with RuneScape.
We've been seeing that in your memes, as I pointed out at the top of the show.
Yeah, some of initially the reactions were mixed. A few people were like, "Oh, come on, this guy's kind of cringe," and I get that. That's valid. You're not used to it. That's okay. But it felt like it's something I felt like we were missing as a community. We've got an amazing batch of creators from wonderful podcasts like the RSBANDB podcast, through to YouTubers and Twitch streamers. But I was like, I don't know, I just like making stupid silly little videos, and I was like, this is perfect. There's 20 years of content I can tap into here to make these stupid videos.
And it's surprising nobody has taken the humor centric angle to content creation that's really seen that rocket up, and I guess that's a good thing for you to do as CM too. So it's
a nice way for me to show that I'm, because didn't you say as well, right?
you did some of those at lunch one day or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was the recent Gothixian Cache one. I just had the thought, like I think it was like a Thursday night. I was just sitting there and I was like, oh yeah, imagine if I did that. And then like on the next day, I like checked out. I got the footage of the Gothixian Cache, and then I was like, okay, I'm just going to edit that on my lunch break. I've been self teaching. It's sort of a couple of years of self-taught After Effects just messing around.
That's how it goes with content creation, and, self-teach. You just gradually add more tools to the tool belt.
That's it, absolutely. So necromancy especially has been like the first major update that we've been able to, completely inject the community team into at every level. We've been able to get player insights into the skill really early and continually feed the community info. I think this skill is revelatory, and it's going to continue to grow and develop. I'm starting to sound like Hooli here. And the community are crucial to that development. It really is sort of the heart of it all. I'm glad that we've been able to get out there and really dig into spaces that have generally been a bit hostile's not the word, but like frosty, prickly maybe.
Fair enough.
And
fair enough.
Drive that notion back and be out on social spaces more. And I hope that's worked.
Like the thing that I go back to that was the most shocking on that in terms of frosty, prickly, perhaps, the Fasoa post and Animate Dead and poll that went with that.
I think that again, because I think that we owe a lot to the amazing sort of again, I'm gonna say it's like a sea change of the team being so understanding that coming in, I was like, well, why don't we just tell them? I was weeks in and they were like, okay, so we're going to look at changing Fasoa and Animate Dead. And I was like, okay, open new tab, RS3 wiki Fasoa. I was like, what is that? And I looked it up and I was like, oh, this sounds really good, guys. Like, I don't know if we should we tell them about this? And they were like, I mean, yeah, we can do. And I was like, okay, well, what if we what if we make, and so, we hashed out a plan to get the messaging out early, get feedback. And I was like, well, then we had the Reddit conversation and the community were really good about it. Then, the key feedback that we took away was, can we get a beta world going? And I had the conversation with Mod Easty and Mod Sponge and a couple of the others. And I was like, can we do this? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay, let's just do it. And the ball just kept rolling. And so...
Yeah. And from our community perspective, it was something that was so different to see. And I think I called you that night, Tanis, and we actually said, this is going to go one of two ways. This is either going to work or this is going to, blow up in their faces. And thankfully it worked.
Yeah. So. And I appreciate, I know, not the most, a bit of a touchy subject, but I think that it was a really good proof of concept in that I and the community team felt vindicated in that, hey, this would have been so much worse if this just appeared out of nowhere. This was a dialogue. This was an opportunity for us to show that we want to have more of a conversation, have more of a dialogue. And it's tough news. It's a scary subject, but it was worth it, I think. And it sets a precedent that we can do that sort of thing again. And especially with necromancy, again, I'm going to keep parroting this, but like having a skill like that we're going to be able to say, okay, it's been 2 weeks. How are we thinking?
Right.
How are we feeling? What are the pain points? What are you loving? What are you not loving? What do you want to see more of? What can we iterate on? Having these conversations is going to be
I saw that you guys
fundamental.
were leaning that way, and in another world, that's almost like, well, why would they do that? Does that mean that it feels like it's not finished? But in reality, that's very much in line with this perspective.
It is very much
staff stuff. Yeah,
but it is very much. I think we've really allocated a lot of time to making sure that this is not only the best it can be on release, but the best it can continue to be as it grows. So there's a lot of people on standby post launch to just keep building on it. So I'm so excited, and it's going to be a harrowingly busy and anxiety-inducing month.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Once it's out the door, but the team are going to be amazing. And I'm very, very excited to see how it goes. But yeah, I that's been my hope, is that things like that have been an opportunity to, be more visible and be more out in the community.
Have you had any big learning experiences over the past few months? Anything that surprised you, that allowed you to just take a different perspective away than you were expecting?
I think it's twofold. I think the unbelievable depth of the game, especially like the amount of bloody acronyms. Day one, seeing going on the subreddit or opening the Discord and seeing someone be like, yeah, I want an EOF EZK for HM Zuck, but BOLG is BIS and FSOA and AD make HM KERA better GP per hour. And I'm like,
and you know what? You just said something, and everything you said in there is true, I think. I'd have to go back to the acronyms, but you're right on that.
Yeah. And I was like, what planet am I on? Where am I? What do these words mean? And so there I am on the wiki being like, okay, EZK is a sword. What is BI? Day one, I had my little notebook open being like, BIS means best in slot. Gotcha. FSOA is fractured staff of Armadillo. Gotcha. Kera is short for Kerapack. Got it. It's like languishing over every single acronym. Now it's all second nature. Now I'm like, yeah, obviously. So I sometimes forget when I'm writing reports for the team. I'm like, so this, and this. And I'm like, okay, hang on. I have to go back and then unacronym lots of things just in case they don't use the same acronyms for whatever reason. So that's one part of it, was being flashbanged by acronyms and basically having to learn a second language, which is fine. But then
just wait till you get to actually using high tier PVM. You start thinking about those in your head.
Oh no. I've only just started trying out hotkeys for prayers and stuff, so we've got a long way to go, but we'll get there. The other thing that I think has been a real learning experience is I was like, sort of my general goal and ethos is that I want to make space for the team, in so much as, it's a small but incredibly passionate team of committed individuals that work tirelessly, even outside of the hours they're supposed to. I know, that work tirelessly to make RuneScape the best it can be. And I want to be able to invite those people out into our social spaces, onto our Reddit, onto Twitter, onto Discord, and share their work, be open, candid, and take pride in their achievements. But to do that, it is my job, it is my duty to make sure that they feel safe, comfortable, and ready to do that.
Okay. And you do that by fostering communication, building that relationship, I guess.
Yes. It is by generating dialogue with the community and gaining trust, but also by setting clear boundaries of saying, I want to arm the team, the JMods, with the confidence to get out there and say, here's what I'm working on. Here's what I've done. Here's what I'm proud of. This took me so long. It can be kind of nothing. It can seem very small to a player, but the idea of being able to go out and say, this bug, here's a screenshot of a bug or something. And they could be like, this bug took me 6 days to fix. Please clap. I tried so hard to get rid of this bug, and be able to be more human and laugh about it and enjoy the feeling of overcoming these adversities to make the game the best it can be. But these spaces are also not for folks to just rock up and lambast these JMods who work so hard. So I want them to come out.
And that's always been the biggest takeaway from our Behind the Crowns with the devs, is that they just have so much passion for what they do.
So much passion. Absolutely unbelievable. I don't know if you've seen it recently, but Mod Ryan has been putting out posts on Twitter just saying like, does anyone want to just group up and do some bossing? And that's evenings and weekends, just putting out the call for doing stuff. And I got my first 99 on I think it was like a Thursday evening. Got it at like 10 p.m. on a Thursday or something. Spear messaged me and was like, hey, just saw the broadcast, congrats. I was like, nice, thank you, that's really lovely. And a couple of people the next day reached out to me at work and were like, hey, I saw you got a 99 yesterday, that's really cool, well done. And So they are incredibly passionate, and they're always watching, always playing. And again, going back to what I said earlier, they see things on Reddit, on Discord, on Twitter, but sometimes they don't feel comfortable engaging or acknowledging. And that's both because perhaps they don't feel like they're equipped enough to answer, maybe. So I want to make sure that they feel like I and Huli and Azana and Modnoms can teach them how to engage on social spaces, how to engage with players.
How to have the discussions, and with you out there showing that we've been doing this before. It continues building that bridge, and I'm content to call that a bridge of trust. I have to say, because it's a case, I think, in that case of mutual trust that you're building, where the community starts to trust you, but by extension, the community also starts to trust developers that might have given them in reason at a macro level in the past to not trust the way things were going to go for the game. And without that trust, you just can't have those conversations. And I think that is something, and this is 100% brutal, honest commentary from us, that's something that has been missing in the past, if we're being honest, I think. And could have prevented a lot of, I want to say, miscommunications in terms of updates that were, in a sense, thought that they were going to be bigger and marketed at different crowds than they were supposed to be. And for the eagle-eyed listeners who have been with the podcast for a long time, yes, I'm talking about Menaphos back in the day. I don't know if you, Mod Doom, had a chance to read up on how that saga went in 2017.
No, that is completely new to me. I will have to. I've got my 2 history degrees. I'll go and do my research.
Yeah, I would
look it up.
definitely go and read up on how that went and what that spurred, because that was in our view, from the analysis we did on it at the time, that was a case of the CM team, and by extension Jagex as a whole, not setting the correct expectations for the project, and that just left the community in a different spot when it launched. And I think by building the trust, and this is where it gets back to you, by building the trust that you've been doing, you get to a point where you can more easily have these discussions and bring things out about where they're supposed to be.
So, absolutely. And I appreciate that it's not an easy thing. I can just snap my fingers and be like, oh, all right, every JMod on Twitter, let's go, come on. But
they might not want to do that, right? So you got to figure out the right way for them,
scary.
Whether it be Discord or Reddit or something.
Yeah,
else.
And I will not ever insist on any of the team doing that. That is what CMs are for. That is what I'm here to do. But if they want to, I want them to feel comfortable doing that. Because, especially if it's something that the community aren't happy with, if it's something that the community, if it's, especially when delivering tough news or something like that, I don't want that. That is where I come in. I don't want the JMods to feel like they have to do everything else from a design and development standpoint, all of that. They do enough. They don't need me to also then be like, cool, so get out and go out there and talk about this on Twitter, because they don't have to. But if they want to, I want them to feel empowered and comfortable and confident enough that they can do it if they feel the need.
Fair enough. And I guess, given your past experience, you said that in places you've been in the past, the CM team and devs were in, different hemispheres, so to speak. Did you find that immersing yourself in the RS community helped with this trust building and building these bridges between player and dev? Yeah.
I think that, right now, as you've sort of touched on, trust is important. And I think that the way that we build trust is delivering on our goals. And I can't believe I'm parroting a phrase I mock Huli for saying so often. We're in the crawl stage of a crawl, walk, run.
Yeah.
I said the thing. There you go. Tick the bingo card. I have a bingo card of things.
He's been doing that ever since he arrived on scene.
Yeah. I've got a bingo card of things he references. He mentions a couple of different things, but the one right in the middle of the bingo card is crawl, walk, run. We've had this whole sea change at Jagex being community driven. The whole team, from the executives all the way down to little old me, can feel the change. We're receptive, flexible, we're sensitive to the community. It is very early days, but we're seeing the changes in how we operate, like the FSOA changes, things like that. I want to continue to drive towards more communication, more transparency, roadmaps. I'm going to say the scary word, polls, only when relevant and only when they're actionable.
Okay.
We're not doing the old school thing. We're not doing that.
Important that you underscore that.
If we have the time and the foresight and the opportunity to say, if we really can't decide on something, it is the obvious solution, right? If we are like, what do we do out of XYZ? What do we do? We can't pick out of ABC things. Why don't we just ask the players? And so I've asked a few times and I've been told not for this one, or, not for this one. Or sometimes we don't have the time to, put it all together, put a poll up.
I was thinking Soul Dive would have been a category.
Yes.
For that.
So yeah, absolutely. So I would love to do more of that and just more engagement in general. So I think that does come with the challenges, building up trust. It does involve that sometimes I have to be the bearer of bad news. Some things simply have to be, and the community can be very upset and very emotional. And it's up to me to pass through that frustration, see through it, and get to the core of the feedback and make it constructive, actionable, understandable. And I get that. I'm not always going to be the good guy in the community's eyes, but that's my job. I'd certainly rather be the one getting into the thick of it and wading through thousands of Reddit comments on things like the FSOA thread than the team who are already under so much pressure, both external and self-imposed, to make the game the best it can be. They go through so much, and a lot of that is self-imposed. A lot of that is from themselves. They love this game to death, and they want this to be the best it can be. I mean, look at game jams, right? Like, they are incredible.
Yeah, those
stuff.
always come up in terms of passion projects and whatnot.
There's
just so much fun stuff that we talked about with that one, and it's just like the community hit list week. They always, the game jams and the community hit list just always hit the mark and say, I see everybody in the community saying this is what we say when we mean quality of life. And
I would love to make community hit list like a consistent thing.
It's just the case of all the gears turning properly with that, and it comes back to, like you said, trust. And every player has an expectation of what they want the game to be, and as we said, that we've been bitten in the past before, and that's something Tanis and I have talked about so much. Go ahead.
I totally understand it, and I don't begrudge the community for being passionate. I don't, but at the same time, I don't want these people who put 110% into this game, and these JMods that pour their heart and soul into this game, to see that those really emotional, reactionary comments and posts and take it to heart, because I know that's not to say that I don't. Those emotional posts and those heated comments are right, because it shows how much the players care. But when the team see them and take them to heart, it's not healthy and it's not helpful. So I try and strip away that emotional language and deliver the feedback at the heart of those impassioned comments. It's not always easy, and it does get to you. It gets to me quite a lot, but it's so important for me that the team sees the core feedback in those comments, and not the sort of,
and not the vitriol if that comes up. Yeah,
and the heat that comes off those comments. I think it's worth doing that for me to be able to turn around and say, instead of them seeing 1,000 comments saying, "Oh, this team doesn't care," that this is hypotheticals. I can't think of a comment off the top of my head, but just comments along those lines of the team don't care, the team aren't taking us seriously, they think they don't think we care, or they JMods don't play the game, etc., etc. Oh my god, they play the game so much. But it's my job to strip away all of that and then just say, okay, what they're actually saying is they don't like this, but they've just said it in a very, very emotional and somewhat offensive, not offensive, but somewhat hurtful way. So it's about striking that balance.
Yeah, it's something, again, something that Tanis and I always talk about a lot, right? Directness.
Directness and setting the expectations, right? And I think when you do a good job of setting expectations, then you can be direct. And if you look over the past, Shane and I both say that, like, Mod Jack might not always say what you want to hear, but it is always what needs to be said. Right?
Yes.
Like for as a player, right? And I always say sometimes, he's the one that will tell you got to take your medicine. And I'm glad to see that the CM is taking that position as well, because I think you're the right person to set the expectations and then be direct with people. This is what we're doing. This is why we have to do it. And I mean, how do you feel about that, Mod Doom? Do you tend to agree with that, or can you fill us in? Kind of what your take is on that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think it's a difficult position because I understand players' frustrations and I understand the situations and the predicaments that they find themselves in. But ultimately, I want to make sure that I stand by the team and the decisions that are made with good reason. It's not to say that I'm not saying the company's always right, but I want to see that no decision is made without good reason. And so that balance is always a challenge of being able to go and do the feedback, do the feedback run, go and check out all our platforms, go and get all of our data, and then go back and say, okay, here's where we're at. But then also be able to go back and respond to players and engage with them and say, this isn't what you want to hear, and provide see both sides of the argument. It's a difficult one, and it's something that I'm trying to get better at. But it is a difficult conversation to have. And sometimes there have been conversations where we've gone back and said, the community really feels like this, or the community is really pushing hard on this point. And again, I am so unbelievably grateful that the team, when I do go back to them and say that, they're like, okay, what do you suggest? And then all of a sudden we have a conversation, and that is then, things can change. They don't always change. Not everything can change. Some things are too big or some things are too small to change. But
I think the important part is the dialogue and the conversation.
For sure. And I think that there are things that are brought up that then don't. There are things that come up that I try not to let slip away. I can give you an example. A couple of weeks back, my God, was it months back now? Where is the time going? I asked people about what they wanted to. Someone mentioned something about the cherry tree rest animation, and they said, "Where is that? When can I get that again? Where is that still in the game?" And I had never seen or heard of this animation before, but I decided to use it as a conversation starter. And I said, "Okay, well, I've never seen this before. What else have I not seen that you would like to see in the game? Like what have you not had a chance to get for years in, superhero lightning?" Mm-hmm. People talking about the superhero lightning, people talking about Gillinor games. I had a whole list of these written down somewhere. I can't find it anymore. A whole page of just different items from different events and all sorts of stuff from the past decade that are no longer available. For whatever reason. And I took this list and I went to the team and I said, here's a list of stuff. And this list is growing every day. Today, I got more stuff to put on that list. And I just presented the list to the team and I was like, okay, what are we doing with these? What are we hiding these for? What are these in the game, but not available for? What are we doing with this? And so that kind of sparked a discussion around where do we put these? Are these are these Solomon Store editions? Are these Premier editions? Are these
Oddments, Yak Track,
are
maybe.
these
Who
oddments?
knows
Are these,
where?
yeah, are these? Where do we put these? Where do they go? How do we earn them? How do these make their way into the game in a way that doesn't invalidate the people who got them when they first came out?
Yeah.
Because some people have had these and been completely, let's say for example, I got something from the Gillinor Games event back in 2012. And that was the only time you could get that stuff. And you've been rocking it ever since. What do you do if it's suddenly, it's like 500 oddments? That's kind of stings.
That's a difficult conversation, because that's also kind of a novelty special item for those cases.
It is absolutely. So it's very difficult for that sort of thing. I think it's certain stuff like that is a difficult conversation to have, because but I will keep pushing those topics and keep reminding people and saying, well, maybe we can divide these up. Let's say let's say a group of these can come out with a certain event, and let's say a couple of these can come out at a certain time of year. Or let's say, if some of these are really, really cool, we can just put them in Solomon's General Store or as a Premier reward or something like that. If we want to, but just to make sure that they are still on the table. And so it's a lot of spinning plates, which is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I can only imagine what that must be like, all the lists and documents and everything that you keep track of with that. And I think at that point we look to the future, and I want people to realize that a big part of our discussion, and we met naturally in the middle on this when producing this podcast, was about trust. So I guess we say, where do we go from here in terms of trust building? I mean, obviously, like you said, you've had your successes, you've had a couple misses and whatnot, but where do you go from here in terms of trust building? What would you like to do next on that page?
I mean, this is a tricky question. Sticking to the plan, really. Just keeping on the path we were already on, with more dialogue, more active engagement on every platform, and embedding. So sort of to be specific with, this is very late to be bringing this up, but specifically my role in the community team is to be embedded in the development cycle early, and to be a core player voice into development at early stages, and to be able to get players excited about things as and when they're coming up. I know that I remember you put a thing in the list of questions that you wanted to bring up about the sort of leeway and wiggle room that the community team has.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it, but to be honest, a lot of the wiggle room in terms of what the CM team can do might not ever be seen. What's that Futurama quote? Is it when you do things right, people won't be sure you did anything at all?
Right.
There haven't been any so far, fingers crossed, touch wood. But for the most part, there haven't been obvious, like, oh, guys, this is a terrible idea. For the most part so far. And again, that's not to say we've had a perfect track record, and that's not to say that we won't have issues in the future. But we are more receptive, more flexible, more open to those conversations, so that when things do happen, we want to have that dialogue, and we can try and make sure that we strike a healthier balance. And again, part of that building of trust is making those mistakes.
Yeah. And I was actually going to ask, do you see any of these big roadblocks on the horizon that need to be navigated around in that, or is that asking too much at this point?
No, I think the thing I've tried to extol to the community is just constructive feedback. Constructive and reasonable feedback.
Yeah,
is the terminology I always use. It makes my job easier, but it also gives reasonable barometers for us to work with when we're talking to the team, the wider team. And again, the sort of core things that I'm interested in are, right now, my priorities are obviously necromancy, but also making sure that I clear the way for more JMods to feel comfortable getting in touch with the players, answering questions, sharing insights, offering more knowledge. I'll still be leading from the front, of course.
Of course. I think you have to in that kind of role.
Yeah, I have to be. Yeah. I have to be it feels like the next step is to show the rest of the team, see, the water's fine. They don't bite. Come on in. And getting them to be more open, talking to players. And I think that is the next step. I think over the next few weeks and months, it is crucial to me personally that I make it clear to the players how seriously we are taking the community engagement, how serious we are about being player driven, and how much of an example necromancy is as a skill that develops with players. And I think if that is successful, which I'm confident it will be, I hope that convinces players and brings them a little bit closer to
brings them into the conversation, able to have those discussions.
Yeah, and then from there being able to say, okay, I've been very clear and transparent with you, and we've had a lot of conversations around necromancy. Here are the rest of the team, because obviously before I joined, a lot of the team were very active on socials, and some of the team were more active and have had to sort of quieten down and hunker down as they prepare for big projects or what have you. But I think I would like to make it a general rule, not a rule, but a general atmosphere that CM team leads from the front and the rest of the team are always welcome and always free to engage with the community, but also have CM backing them up.
Right.
So, if they're like, oh, I really want to reply to this, but I don't know how to word it, or what do I say? They come to me.
So they come to you for help.
I have their backs 100%.
And that's the exact same thing you're doing for the players as well, is that you have our backs for that. And I don't know if I've ever heard CM discussed in that sort of angle before, where you're equally supporting the devs and the players in that. And that sounds to me like something that people don't necessarily see and don't necessarily think of with CM. So that's a wonderful insight on that. So you'd say that probably 6 months down the line, you're in a position, and please forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth here, you're in a position where the community trusts you more. They're able to see that you guys are making progress on the dialogue, and in general, things have become, I'd say, easier to have those discussions between dev and player, either through CM or directly. And of course, feel free to fill in the blanks if there's anything else you'd like to see, 6 months down the line on that. But that's the general sense you've given me of where you see RuneScape's communications in about 6 months.
Absolutely. I think that's a very, very fair interpretation of it. I that is absolutely what we want. I want the team to feel comfortable getting out there, and I want to feel like the community trusts me to be embedded. I want to trust the team to invite me into these conversations, to have me in at the ground floor for everything. And I want the community to trust that I'm in there and that I'm not going to do them dirty. And I'm not going to misrepresent them or not give a fair assessment. And I think that so far I've been able to do that. But here's another hooliism. Judge us by what we do, not what we say. I think what we are hoping to achieve in the next 6 to 12 months is hugely ambitious. And I, both as a community team and as a game, there is so much on the horizon. I really want to push us to be as transparent about all of it as early as we can, because I think it's crucial to just build trust with the players. So I think that is really what I want to lean on as our driving epithet, is to be more transparent, be more communicative, and build up that trust, so that when we do deliver on these things, it feels earned and players feel vindicated and feel like they've been part of the conversation.
Wonderful. Tanis, do you have anything else before we move on to Mod Doom's pick of the week?
No, I just want to say thanks for being here, and it's been really if I could put one word to this whole talk, it's reassuring. I feel very reassured today.
I am overjoyed to hear that. No, that's fantastic. That's very, very kind of you to say.
How about you, Mod Doom? Anything community-wise or anything else before we move on to your pick of the week?
No, I would love to take this opportunity to thank the community for being so incredibly welcoming and giving me the time of day and hearing me out and giving me the chance to prove myself, and I hope I continue to do the community justice for as long as it takes.
Right on, right on. And of course, being the full RSBNB update experience this time for Behind the Crown, we have to ask, what would you have for a pick of the week? And it could be a book, movie, app, game, anything you're reading, working on, TV show, you name it. What do you got for us?
I have been really digging a book called Itchy Tasty, An Unofficial History of Resident Evil, written by Alex Anil, which is a wonderful, wonderful book cataloging the history of the Resident Evil series, which I think is incredibly insightful and a very, very interesting insight into the early days of the games industry and the Resident Evil franchise. So if you're a fan of the franchise and you're a fan of survival horror or just a history of games, I highly recommend it. It's wonderful.
That's definitely a good pick of the week for anybody in the gaming community and who plays games in general on that. So thank you for that. I don't think we don't normally go that way in terms of books about games, so that's very much appreciated for that. We'll throw a link to that in the show notes. So thank you for that. But of course, that brings us to the end of this episode. So big, huge thank you to you, Mod Doom, for joining us for another Behind the Crown. We really appreciated you taking the time out of your evening to sit down with us. And we've just got to say, keep on the path you've been going. It's been so refreshing to hear the different perspective on community management since you joined and you guys started talking about that a bit more.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very, very much for having me.
And of course, we'll be back next week for another episode of RSBNB Update. And if you want that delivered automatically to you, the best way to do that is to subscribe. You can find that at update.show/subscribe. We're on all the podcast listeners out there, Apple, Google, Pocket Cast, Spotify, and more. Just visit update.show/subscribe. And we're also on YouTube at youtube.com/RSBNB. There we post the video versions of the shows and the nibbles from each and every week. And if you like the show, definitely do drop us a like and subscribe. It greatly helps the channel out as well. And with that, we'll be back next week for another episode of RSBNB Update. See you then, everyone. Take care.
Thanks so much.
See ya.